Good morning. I needed to improvise a little bit since I switched from topic. So I took some notes. I don't know, it's maybe too long, but Kate will do the timekeeping, I guess. I know her, so she's very strict on that. So let's start. I just wanted to talk a little bit about giving this general picture about the current situation, you know, this world order that is like, seems to collapsing, not collapsing, maybe it's too big word for that, but drastically changing, going over to the US policy in that, and then going over to the European Union. I want to talk about it because also there is a lot of changes, and then what should be done or what kind of principles we should defend. So first of all, this drastically changing world order, you know, the international system as we know it, United Nations system, and let's say the international law, the principles of international law seems to be very, in struggle. There is a kind of international power struggle, and they're a victim of it. And you see that also in the drastically increasements of the military spending, worldwide military spending. Next week, CIPRI will release a report where it's shown that compared with last year, the military spending, worldwide military spending, will increase with 9.4%. And that's the 10th consecutive year of military spending that increases. So more than $2.7 billion. A lot of that amount is, by the way, invested in nuclear arms. So, and then you have Trump, of course, that is ditching existing certainties with an authoritarian domestic and foreign policy. Let's say the classical imperialistic policies. But maybe this has changed, the style of Trump has changed, but I think it's there's a kind of red line in that kind of policy. If you look back to the end of the Cold War, you had the priorities of the strategic priorities of the United States, and it has been leaked at time by, and it's known now as the Wolfowitz Doctrine, which says that in '92, that the major objective of what became known as this Wolfowitz Doctrine was to prevent the emergence of a new rival either on the territory of the former Soviet Union or elsewhere. And let's say that document outlined a really imperialistic policy of unilateralism and preemptive military actions with the fundamental goal of keeping the US in the role of superpower in a new world order. And I think inside NATO, this policy has been instrumentalized by the US and let's say that all those EU NATO countries or European NATO countries need to be part of that strategic priority. That's why we say often that the EU NATO countries are or the European NATO countries, are kind of vassals of this kind of policy. They neglected their own strategic interests and security policies. And that's what we saw, you know, in the years coming, the extension of NATO, so 16 members to 32 members in the years after the Cold War, the idea of having Ukraine as a member of NATO, knowing that in the Crimea, for example, is a military base of the Russians, you know, that's like really saying, Russia, you should get away, you know, it's, of course, that was known that this could create tensions, and as France and Germany that time defended, they were opposed to that, and they said, yeah, this will unbalance the situation, the security situation in Europe. So this kind of policy was shaped along these geostrategic lines of the United States. And you know the well-known saying of Hastings Ismay in the 50s, who summarized NATO's raison d'etre, reasons of existence. That's to keep the Soviet Union out, the Americans in, and the Germans down. And even after the Cold War, that never has changed. And we have seen that in, for example, the economic policy after the war in Ukraine broke out, where let's say the energy ties with Russia were partly broken, and instead the Americans came in, you know. And so Europe, talking about strategic autonomy all the time now, makes itself independent, more dependent in energy supply from the United States. So this is only one example. even the militarization, you know, to have that kind of strategic autonomy. It's another CIPRI report. 64% of the weapons supplied to the European Union, in that sense, are from 64% are from the United States, and that's an increasement. So this whole idea of a military strategic autonomy is a fiction, is an illusion. So going back to this strategic autonomy, there are quite a lot of problems. The first I already said, that is a fiction. Secondly, the European answer to, you know, true militarism, to become strategic autonomous, is also an illusion, because it doesn't give real power. You have no power through military strength if you have no political unity. And you see that strategic priorities are different in Eastern Europe compared to those in Southern Europe, where people, for example, are more concerned about the impact of migration instead of the possible Russian aggression, what is the case in the thinking of people in the Baltic states probably and Poland. Third, this kind of EU foreign policy, even if you're strategic autonomous, it's mostly connected to, let's say, it's a military arm connected to an economic bloc. You see that in many ways, the transactional oriented dealings they make with authoritarian regimes. You can list them, you know, Tunisia, Libya, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Israel, where, you know, in exchange for energy security and migration control, all principles of human rights, because it's the talk they always use, the human rights, the values, the European values, disappear suddenly. We see that in Gaza, how important these international law and values are for Europe. They are not important. So if you have a military strengthened economic bloc as the European Union, or in search for raw materials, strategic minerals as they call it, it's not strategic autonomy, but it's neo-colonialism. Fourth, the militarism of the EU contradicts its identity as enshrined in the, it's on only 1 minute, okay, and then I come to the, as enshrined in the Treaty on the European Union. I just quoted, the Union's aim is to promote peace, its values, and the well-being of its peoples. You know, if you see military spending at the expense of social security, that's clearly the case. Belgium, for example, 60 billion savings in social expenditures, and at the same time, for the same coming 4 years, they want 17 billion for military spending. So this is not in what is written in the Treaty on the European Union, you know, for the well-being of people to promote peace. No, it's the opposite of it. So Europe is part of that capitalist system that is not concerned about, you know, that's mainly concerned in this competition for market domination, control of resources, capital accumulations, and so forth and so forth. It's not about security. It's a kind of way of trying, and then say they will succeed, but of trying, I'm sorry. I have a third part, so okay, 1 minute please. Of trying to be part of that game of geostrategic rivalry, you know? As NATO says, China, Russia are strategic rivals. You have the US, and now with the strategic crisis, the transatlantic crisis with Trump, they want to be kind of own bloc, strong bloc, military, and they translate it on exclusively militarily. So to close, I think peace and capitalism, I had other things to say, but I have no time now, are two concepts, I think, that are difficult to combine. Militarism and capitalism go against fundamental values of equality, solidarity, and humanity. And we need to revive many ideas that are not new, you know, old. And I give you just one example that has totally disappeared from our agenda, but to revive ideas of a new international economic order, for example, to counter neoliberalism, imperialism, and neocolonialism. There was even a declaration by on that new international economic order in '74, voted by the UN General Assembly. However, it was immediately and strongly rejected by the US for obvious reasons, because it doesn't fit in this kind of priorities the US has as imperialistic state. So it's also up to us, social movements and left forces, to keep fighting for the principle that there is no peace, no peace without social justice, and that peace is impossible if people have no access to essential needs in a healthy environment. It's a struggle, and that's, I think, the most important thing as a social movement, to face these challenges, a struggle that social organizations, trade unions, environmental groups, human rights, peace activists must fight together, even if the balance of power seems very unequal. But resistance pays off, history proves it. Workers' rights, for example, came by struggle. So to finish, militarization and a new arms race come at the expense of necessary environmental and social investments. I think we all agree on that. Tensions between militarized blocs prevent swift actions to save our planet, for climate change, to address unsustainable inequality and poverty, and avert the nuclear weapons threat. So we need a new security system, and that's the other thing. Not only economically a new order, but a new security system that is people-centered, inclusive, and based on respect for mutual security interests. So that's the word common security, the Helsinki spirit, let's say, from the 70s. We have to emphasize, and that's the Helsinki spirit, that real security is based on the principle of I'm only safe if my neighbor feels safe. Very easy. And that's our message that we have to distribute to our governments. Thank you very much. Sorry for the time.